Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for holding out till the very end for the last two talks. I appreciate your fortitude. I also want to say what a great honor it is to be here with all of you. And I've already met so many wonderful students and professionals in my field, and I really am thrilled. And I hope it's the beginning of a wonderful conversation we can have about the care of cultural heritage. So thank you for the invitation to come. So the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston was founded in 1870 and opened in 1876 in a Gothic Revival building in Copley Square, which is this building. But very soon we outgrew our building, and in 1909 we had to build, and oops, sorry. The only place we could find to build was the local circus and rodeo grounds. So some people say my museum is still a little bit of a circus, but anyhow, we have a good heritage for that. Our collection is encyclopedic. It spans all continents, all time periods, from ancient excavated objects to ship models, musical instruments, costumes, contemporary art, and everything in between. We also have a sister museum in Nagoya in Japan, and we have a lot of loans and exhibitions that are traveling all over the United States and all over Europe, and especially in Japan, and we are now beginning to reach out to China as well. So I hope to illustrate to you today some of the lessons that we've learned as conservators, collections care specialists, managers, conservation engineers, art handlers, packers, all of whom work together with data management specialists, project managers, and construction teams. And this will just be a little taste. I'm very happy to talk to anyone who's interested after the session. My own department is is conservation and collections management, and it is itself about 80 people. It's a lot of people. We have about 60 conservators working in the building in all different areas of expertise. With that, we have data management for our database of the collection. We have the registrars. We have people involved in loans. We have mount makers, and various collections care specialists who really are the art handlers, some of whom are particularly involved in preventive conservation activities like monitoring the quality of our air in and outside of cases and light levels and this kind of thing. So over the years, the museum continued to expand. The Evans Wing was added in 1915, the Decorative Arts Wing in 1928, and the unfortunate White Wing, which never really merited a photograph, you see here is the area that we work in, and I will tell you it's in pretty poor shape. We also have the Pei Wing, which was opened in 1981. Our most recent project required the dislocation of almost a third of the total volume of the museum's overall storage. This project was begun in 1999 when we hired Lord Norman Foster and partners to design a new master plan for the museum that reinvigorated the original master plan, which had been created by the architect Guy Lowell in 1909. And this plan was intended to reorient the museum along the north-south axis. So here is the west and here is the east, and some of this was demolished, and then this is the new building that you see here. So this expansion required the emptying of the 1928 Decorative Arts Wing, which was demolished, on the east side of the building. And this housed period rooms, an American and European decorative arts collections on 2 floors. An old garden courtyard was enclosed and reconfigured, and changing exhibition space was developed. The project increased the square footage of the museum by about 28%, adding 53 new galleries, including 9 period rooms, and 11 additional galleries were renovated and reinstalled in the existing building. Our schematic designs were unveiled in 2002. The completion of the construction and installation of the Phase 1 took place in November 2010. So the new American wing has been open for 4 years, which seems very hard to believe, but anyhow, that's most of what you see here. We had a complex system of oversight, including project management branches for building systems, architecture, gallery fit-out, with in-house coordinators and liaisons between the architects, in-house designers, contractors, curators, trustee, building committee, major donors, and staff. So if you want to design by committee, you have it right there. My presentation today will show you some of the methods that we developed during several of these major collection moves that have taken place over the past decade. And I'd like to share with you some of the challenges and lessons learned in this most recent project. So even though we were moving the collections that we needed to move off-site for the first time, about half an hour away, we needed to provide access, and all I can say is, thank goodness we were a little bit more advanced in 2008 than we were in 1909, because it was very bumpy, and it would have taken a long, long time. So, this is the only chart I'm going to show you, and it does not involve any numbers, so I hope you can thank me later for that. But this illustrates, I think, some of the complicated nature of what many other speakers have been talking about today. The kind of assessment that's required prior to the move, registration, inventory, database entry, weight, dimensions, location, so that we weren't going to lose anything. We also tried very hard to photograph everything that we possibly could before we moved things, because many objects in the collection had not been photographed. We needed to prepare our new storage location. We wanted to be concerned about safety. We have a lot of objects that were fumigated, organic materials that were fumigated with things like DDT or other terrible, very toxic materials, and we wanted to make sure we were not carrying insects or mold into our new packing. So there was cleaning. These are other issues that we were concerned about, as other people have mentioned today, but we needed to make sure that everything remained accessible in our new location. So one of the biggest lessons we learned, and I want to thank Joachim Huber from Zurich, from Prevart in Zurich, for these slides, you need to think about treating similar objects in a similar way and devoting maybe 5 or 10% of your resources to the very special problem or very fragile objects that you cannot put together. We may use different kinds of materials than Joachim used here, but the principle is the same. So we realized we had some problems with our documentation system in storage, and I think that you paper and book people can appreciate this. Our identifiers are almost entirely gone, eaten by silverfish. It was quite clear that something needed to be done, and this, in many cases, was all the documentation we had for some of our excavated objects from Egypt that had maybe never even been unpacked for almost 100 years. So we started with a database. It's extremely important to document, as I think you have gathered now, and this shows you the kind of database that we used, and I'm happy to say this is Gallery Systems' partner of Spectrum that Wilbert showed you earlier. We were able to input a lot of information in here, including very useful photographs, which were going to be extremely important when we reconstructed these rooms several years later. So many of these rooms had to be deinstalled, very carefully documented, moved off-site, brought back on-site, and reconstructed. These are some of our ancient storage areas, and I just want you to pay particular note to these cabinets, which I believe were given to us in the 19th century or early 20th century by the V&A. So I wanted to thank Boris for that very much, because they helped us a lot, but of course we were still using them until a few years ago, and they were very, very dangerous with all of this glass that could just shatter at a moment's notice. We had terrible overcrowding, and based on our documentation systems, so we tried to photograph everything, and at least 13,000 objects were photographed before, that had never been photographed before, were photographed in our project. This is another kind of documentation that was done. This is TMS, the museum system, which is a gallery systems database that is very easy to mold to your own needs. And what this is the way that we figured out how much space we were actually going to need, because when you are working with 35,000 or more objects, it's incredibly challenging to figure out how much space you're going to need. So volunteers and museum staff put in all of the dimensions, the kind of storage format that would be optimal, what kind of packing or securement was needed, and whether it required a custom support. And we used these databases to develop our storage systems. Here is another one which talks about condition. We did not do object-by-object condition surveys for the most part, but this was very quick and easy. We could say it's a conservation priority 1. This needed some treatment before it was rehoused, or 5, it needed nothing. And a few little quick check boxes, so we were really able to streamline this activity in a very good way. All right, so moving the collection. We developed a variety of systems intended to be used for transport and storage. They needed to be modular, so we didn't have to rethink it every time we wanted to consider moving an object. We wanted to have them be as archival as possible so that we could store them in the enclosures that they were moved in. We needed them to be cost effective, and we needed them to be easily accessible because researchers, curators, conservators were going to need access to them, and we were going to have to bring some of them back to the building for reinstallation or for traveling exhibitions. So we anticipated this, and we moved, as I said, about 35,000 objects off-site, and we rehoused another 50,000 objects on-site. So it was a very large project, and I only wish that I could have the nice flat boxes that we were just shown a moment ago, because as challenging as it was, you could think about it in one way or two ways rather than many ways. Our new storage area was about half hour away from our museum. It went up, I think, 30 feet in the air. It was 35,000 square feet or something like that. So obviously you need to think vertically when you have a space like this in order to pack everything in. And here you see some objects up very high and a couple of different ways of packing these materials, these objects. So here are the basic framework that we used, which we found quite useful. A poplar pallet. Now poplar is one of the least acidic woods. It has one of the least volatile acidities that you can find in a wood. We needed to use wood for pallets for a variety of reasons. One was that our fire departments were not very happy with plastics. They actually were happier with wood, believe it or not. But for the most part, we tried to avoid anything that would be off-gassing. And that said, we also used medium density overlay, which is a plywood used for concrete forms, which has a paper surface. It does have wood acids in it, but it is made with a phenolic adhesive, so it is much less volatile than a formaldehyde-bearing resin. And you see an example of one of these things that we called a sled, where we would put maybe 1 or 2 objects, or 3 or 4, depending on their size. And these were standard size, and we would pack as many objects in there as we safely could, so they would be moved together. And then finally, a perforated, powder-coated steel or aluminum bed on which we would put our furniture in particular. And this is just a word about the materials. We use a lot of Volara foam, which is a closed-cell polyethylene foam. We use Ethafoam, another open-cell polyethylene foam, blue board or gray board, which are archival cardboards, and we tried to not work with the very fancy archival suppliers, but find a cardboard manufacturer whose products we could test, which we used, and they were a fraction of the price. Plastic polyethylene buckles with cotton straps, and in some cases people do use polyethylene or polypropylene pallets and other enclosures. And here you see this is an on-site production of some mounts, some storage mounts for similar pots to the ones that you saw in my nasty slide. But notice we're very inventive. We use a coffee can to make the holes. We don't have to use anything fancy if we can get away with something else. So a lot of creativity involved. Here you see an example of our storage method for very small, delicate glass objects in drawers. We also constructed these carts to move objects on, which were basically constructed from the same materials that some of the shelving was constructed from, and these were incredibly handy, and we're still using them today. Word about the transport, we did use these big box trucks, but we also acquired a van that could go back and forth every single day. These box trucks, and this is a small one, would go, during our move, they would go every day, then they would go every few days, then they would go every week. Today, now, they go every 2 weeks. So if you really need to see something urgently, you have to travel off-site to do it. But we also found that even covering objects with 3 mil polyethylene was remarkably effective for several months in stabilizing the relative humidity, even if you were in very unstable conditions. So that was quite reassuring to us. Here are a couple more of our transport methods. This one is made with very adjustable steel or aluminum. I can't remember if it's steel or aluminum, and you can put your screws in almost anywhere and apply your shelf anywhere you need to support whatever you needed to support. So objects would sometimes be moved on these or this kind of arrangement, and then they would be taken out of here and put onto shelves in the final storage location, and we would reuse these carriers over and over again. And here's an example of one of these being used for a tall case clock. And here's another with smaller objects in one of the other, what we call sleds. Here are some textile rolled tubes which are in a frame that was designed to go back and forth in the truck before final storage. And here you see it loaded up with rolled textiles, which will then be offloaded into the textile storage, in the storage area. And here is our pallet again, and our screen again, and here you see we're fitting it out to support this object with poplar supports, which are padded with ethafoam and Volara. We also use Tyvek, and if people are interested, I'm happy to give a list of the kinds of materials we used. Here's a detail of the adjustable feet that we made to support this particular object. Obviously, you could make this any distance, any size you wanted to, and obviously the straps adjust, and you put your straps, your protection wherever it's needed, and then you take this out and it ends up in storage. And we borrowed a page from the big box stores. I don't know if you have Home Depot here, but giant stores where they need these, what they call order pickers, to access things at the top of shelves. And we all were trained in how to get up there with objects. And you see he's even got a pallet jack up here, and he's going to take one of these pallets off of the shelf. And here you get a sense of how high up we had to go. And here you see our furniture conservator going up, or preparing to go up with an object on this lift on the order picker, and he goes way, way up to the top to put that massive cabinet up. So we figured out how to move these large and heavy objects without needing to use too much manpower, without straining our backs. And very quickly, this is a reusable transport crate specifically developed for upholstered furniture. Here's a Chippendale chair with an upholstered seat that has a protective padding on it, and you see it's strapped and padded. Again, these are completely adjustable, and there will be a way to keep it from going back to front, as you can see here, and then a way to, and you see these are slotted, so you can move them to fit anywhere along that slot, depending on the size of or the thickness of the furniture. And then the buckles to support that, and then a downward pressure of ethafoam, which can again be slotted into any height to keep this stable. So there's our storage, and here just give you a sense of some of the numbers that we had to deal with in the old storage place, and here they are awaiting in the new storage place to be placed on our shelves. And here is another view of the textiles going into the truck. All the costumes were hanging, and we put taffeta covers on them, polyester taffeta covers, which are tied down to secure them. It's rolled right into the truck. There's a nice cover over the entire rack, and then they are brought to textile storage. And here is the rolled storage I was talking about earlier. You saw the rolled storage going into the truck. So you get a sense of the variety of materials and the numbers that we are dealing with. And now just a few quick shots of the kinds of storage that we used. This is actually on site. We used a variety of different manufacturers. All of these cabinets are powder-coated steel, which we decided we liked very much. And I wanted to show you this in particular. This is the before, obviously, and this is the after, and they look much happier. And I wanted to say a word about compact storage. It does have certain disadvantages in that you have to be very careful about the floor loading, but you can actually fit an average of about 75% more of your collection into compact storage if you don't have other concerns like air circulation, for example. So this has been very, very useful for us because when we estimated our collection, for our collection of ancient art, we realized we would need twice as much space as we had. And so this kind of storage was really a lifesaver for us. I don't know what we would have done if we had to fit it all back in the same space. We would have only been able to house half of it. So here's another example. This is the before again and the after, and everything is on a ethafoam bed with pull-out trays, easy to see, accessible, no trip hazards, etc. So we're very happy with this. And now this is just a little, I wanted to make sure that people knew that I had written this book about 10 years ago. It is available from Archetype in London, but we're hoping we'll be able to get it translated into Turkish for you. So we're going to work on that, and I just particularly am fond of this painting. It's John Singer Sargent, and it is Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom, protecting architecture, painting, and sculpture from the ravages of time, which is what we're all about here. So with that, I would like to close, and I want to dedicate this presentation to the past protectors of our collection, the Fire Brigade from 1944. Thank you.